sports enthusiasts. You've just stepped into the ultimate podcast for all things in youth sports. After the Game is where we break down the game within the game, from coaching strategies to the role of parents and the secrets behind running a top-tier program. Expect insightful conversations, expert tips, and a whole lot of sports banter. Whether you're a coach, a parent, or a player chasing dreams, this is your go-to spot. So fasten your seatbelts. Here are your hosts, Ryan and Chad. Let's dive into the action.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to After the Game. Tonight, our special guest is Peter and Tracy Flucke. I have the privilege of having them on. They are the founders of WeBike. This couple has woven their passion for cycling, adventure, and community health into both their professional and personal lives, specializing in engineering, education, enforcement, and encouragement. Their business promotes safe and healthy walking and bicycling communities, and also authors of Coast to Coast on a Tandem and Bicycling Historic Route 66. Their writings delve into the adventure travel with the natural integration of bicycle safety themes, reflecting their expertise. Beyond their business and writing ventures, sports play a significant role in their life story. Both were active athletes in high school, participating in sports like football, wrestling, track, volleyball, and basketball. This love for sports has passed down to their daughters, who not only excelled in high school as two-time Division I pole vault champions, but also competed valiantly at the University of Minnesota. Today, their daughters continue to thrive as successful adult athletes, embodying the healthy, active lifestyle their parents advocate, a testament to the virtues of physical health and community well-being. Welcome, you guys.
Thank you.
Happy to have you on the show.
It's great to be here. Thanks for asking us.
Yes. So, fascinating story with you two. You've gone coast to coast, tandem on a bike. You have a company, WeBike. Let's dive into that first. Tell me more about WeBike.
Yeah,
what was the inspiration behind that?
About my background. Give you a little bit about my background. So I have a degree in recreation and forestry, and I was also a Minnesota police officer and bike cop for a number of years. When it was time for me to leave law enforcement, I was trying to figure out what skill set I had now that, was needed and that other people didn't have. And one of the things that I figured out is that, as a bicyclist, that, it's great to be out riding your bike, but you really need to have, you need to be safe. You need to have the protections that law enforcement provides. And I understood those, having been a cop and a bike cop. But I also understood that, my fellow law enforcement officers were probably not up to speed as much as they should be on why anybody would want to ride a bike in traffic, let alone any kind of distance. So I had a really, really unique skill. And that's what spawned WeBike was, having an understanding eventually of the engineering, the education, the enforcement components that all go into safe, originally bicycling, but eventually walking as well.
And so with that, do you tour around then?
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
Sure. So it's a national company. My primary niche is training law enforcement officers on which laws to enforce to improve pedestrian and bicycle safety. So laws primarily for motorists, but also for pedestrian and bicyclists. But the other thing that happens is you start to realize very quickly that law enforcement isn't going to solve the problem if somebody built a really lousy road that you can't safely walk on, bike on, and drive on. So I literally had to become an expert also in engineering for pedestrian and bicycle safety. So I also train planners and engineers on how to build roads that, again, people can walk on, bike on, and drive on. And then the last component of that is that if you don't know what the leading causes of crashes are, how do you know how to avoid them, right? So that's the education component. It's teaching bicyclists, which mistakes they make that commonly lead to crashes and how to avoid those. Also, which mistakes motorists make that get you into trouble. So it's literally anybody who needs their IQ improved on pedestrian and bicycle safety. they're fair game. So it might be safe routes to school, it might be training law enforcement, it might be the general public. So any of those things.
So there was a lot there. Now, something that did get my that was fantastic. Something that I find interesting there. So you were talking about what is the leading cause of that. So there's a lot of investigation into that. It's data driven. So how do you obtain such information? How do you know? Where do you go? And I would imagine something about having that police background did have some sort of advantage to that.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I've got a degree in recreation and forestry. So I'm trained as an environmental scientist. So I'm used to reading data, processing it, all of that. And then as a police officer, I spent a lot of time writing police reports and then studying others' reports. And so as I progressed, it's important to know there's a lot of things that people think are dangerous, but there's really only a few that actually rise to a level that you're going to spend a lot of time educating folks on it. But you have to understand what the data is. So the National Highway Traffic Safety Institute, the Federal Highway Administration, all those folks, the Wisconsin DOT, they're all studying those things. That information is there. Where the hiccup comes is communicating that information to the people that need it, the motorists, the pedestrians and drivers, and bicyclists. So we don't ever go through an intersection on our bicycle without knowing where every single motor vehicle is that's turning left, because the greatest chances of us being involved in a crash involve a left turning motorist. If other bicyclists don't know that, they're behind the 8 ball already. So people ask us, why aren't you afraid, to ride your bike in traffic, to ride across the country? Because the crashes, by and large, are very predictable and they're very preventable, but only if you know what those causes of crashes are.
It's
Brian's like, what?
The fact that I apologize. It's the fact that you are, well, one, you are very articulate. So, but you have such a diverse background in your academic career that you are really able to grasp that and read the data, process it, and then essentially regurgitate it out there so that other people will understand it better. So what are some of the challenges that you see with that? What's the pushback that you get from the public and from obtaining the data? Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I'll kind of pick on bicyclists. First of all, we always joke that every bicyclist is a traffic safety expert. That even includes the people who are riding illegally against the flow of traffic and statistically increasing their chances of being involved in a crash by 3 times. So, it's hard sometimes to work with your own population because people are out there doing the best they can, just trying to survive, right? But then you also have the motorists, and the motorists have brain lock, to be perfectly honest with you, because when you're driving in a car, the only threat to you as a motorist is another motorist. I'm not going to take you out on my bicycle. And when we don't task the brain with looking for pedestrians and bicyclists, on crash reports, we see all the time, oh, I never saw him. Well, I was right there wearing a fluorescent yellow jacket. It's that your brain was thinking about the next traffic light or what you're going to be doing at work or what you're going to be doing this weekend. So again, it's the education component is how we try to wake up those neurons in people's brains. It's part of the reason we like doing, podcasts like this. If somebody hears, the Fluckes talking, engages with our story, then they tend to go out and drive like they're looking for Peter and Tracy Flucke in a fluorescent yellow-green jacket on their tandem. And they get really excited when they see them. But the whole time they're out there, now they're seeing things that they didn't see before. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to push back for a moment. Growing up, I was always taught to go against the flow of traffic so you could see what was oncoming.
Sure.
So you're saying, I've been wrong my whole
child
to adult life on that?
You're a part of a generation. So back in the 70s, before we started, we had a bike boom back in the 70s, and we started seeing a huge increase in bicycle crashes. And a couple of guys named Cross and Fisher said, do we really know how these crashes are happening? So they started studying them, and that's when they started figuring out that although the logic, to a layman is I can see the car coming, right? I'm going to be able to get out of the way. What they discovered was that's not the problem. What the problem is that the motorists are searching in traffic for conflicts that are coming from predictable locations. So the motorists are all following the rules of the road. So think about when you come up to an intersection and you want to take a right turn in your car. The only place that there's a threat coming is from your left. We're supposed to look left, right, and left again. But what motorists do is we get lazy. We look left and turn right. And then we just plowed into Ryan, who was riding against the flow of traffic coming from the right. You could see the car, but the motorist couldn't see you. So those are the kinds of things that are very difficult to get across to folks because they're data driven and they are not sometimes in the popular culture. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Well, it does now.
That makes a lot of sense. But so would you happen to have the day? I mean, and that's fine if you don't have it handy, but I'm just curious, what are do you happen to know what is the accident, each year by year, how many accidents vehicular involved in bicyclists?
Sure. So the first thing I'll school you on is that professionally, we don't call them accidents because accidents are unpredictable. And if they're unpredictable, they're not preventable, right?
Okay.
So there'd be no purpose to this conversation. Instead, what we call them is crashes. And it's because they're predictable and they're preventable. So in the United States, in an average, and this is the other problem that we have, people overestimate grossly how dangerous it is to ride your bicycle, and then they don't know what to do to prevent crashes. So then they're doubly wrong. So then it makes people like me and Trace look like we're suicidal, right? To ride across the country. Not the case at all. I'm way more likely to die of a heart attack from lack of activity than I am from being in any kind of bike crash, even if I'm not wearing a helmet. So in an average year in the United States, we have about 1,000 bicyclist fatalities.
Wow.
So that's 1,000 people, which is 1,000 too many because one is too many, but we're topping 40,000 motorists a year that die in motor vehicle crashes. Now, there's rate differences on how much people ride and those kinds of things, but most of us aren't afraid to get in our car and drive anywhere we want. But you're talking only 1,000 people. Then the other part of that is half of those crashes happen at night. We're not riding at night, or if we are, we're using good lights, reflectors, tail lights, those kinds of things. Alcohol plays a role. We're not riding intoxicated. Many people are riding against the flow of traffic or wearing black clothing. We're not doing that. So see what I'm doing here is as you start getting things more correct in terms of your behavior as a cyclist, the more education you get out there, the better we build our roads. The number of crashes gets almost nominal at that point.
Yep. You're decreasing the likelihood of a crash to occur because of all those various steps that they follow. The vests, the proper lighting, the proper hand signaling, the checks at four ways.
Yep.
So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense there. And something else, though, you're right. More of those accidents happen. The biggest difference that I would know right off the bat between a vehicular crash and a cyclist crash, when I get in my truck, I drive a truck. When I get in my truck, not gonna lie, I feel invincible. When I get on a bike, I'm afraid to fall down. So, I mean, I think that, that disparity in those numbers, that makes a lot of sense. And like you said, a lot of the alcohol plays a factor into that. So, that I can understand where that's coming from. Now, your goal here is to take that 1,000, right? That's the average that you're having. And you're trying to bring that down as far as you can, as quickly as possible, right? So that's the overall goal of WeBike, right? That's the intent.
It is.
That's fantastic.
One of the things that can help with lowering that number is the design of our communities, the design of our roads, and having them designed in a manner that it's safer and easier for people to walk and bike in our communities. And, years ago, our roads were built for cars, and cars are moving on them. They're moving faster. Their roads are bigger. And we just don't have a lot of roads sometimes that are easy to ride and walk on. So that's something I think communities are looking at, and they're making their roads, or retrofitting their roads to make it easier for people to move. The other thing that's happening in communities, there's a lot more housing and high density housing along different roads. So that whole corridor has changed because there's a lot more people moving in and out because of all the apartments and the density of the housing. So we want to make sure that those people can move through that area by foot and by bike. Because otherwise, if they're all coming in and out with their cars and going down the block to go to the coffee shop, you just are creating so much more gridlock and so many more cars out there. So that's another thing that communities, when they start using more dense housing, they need to really look at their roadways and their transportation to make sure that people can move in all manners of transportation.
That's really interesting, especially about everyone wants to ride their bike to their coffee shop and such, which is, it's not just trendy, but it's also, when you think about the environmental impact there, and you have an environmental science background. So it's kind of twofold what you guys are doing. Not only are you helping people, you're trying to basically rethink how we have our road system set up so that way it allows for the cyclists, but it also has a green impact on it in a positive way.
Yeah.
So that's really good. Now, I'm sorry, go ahead, Tracy.
Well, you want the residents to stay in that community. So if there's a coffee shop down the block, if they can't walk or bike there, they might get in their car and they're not going to drive a block. They're going to go to the one that's across town because they're in their car anyway. And then they're going to add 10 different errands to it. So to have them be able to move through that area where all these services already are, impacts economic development of that area, has those businesses be more viable, and does, the green part of it, it makes it a more friendly place, a better place to be moving through by different forms of transportation. So,
Ryan, another point to that, there's a whole list of why biking is good, but it's also routine health, right? And accommodation. So if we all get the, park in the back of the parking lot and walk that extra couple of yards or take the stairs instead of the elevator. But in our case, I can't remember the last time I took my car to the post office. It's a mile away. I'm gonna walk or ride my bike there. There isn't any place in town that we don't go on our bike. Consequently, I'm not one of those, Wisconsinites that's obese. And, some of it's from watching what I eat, but a lot more of that is just getting out and burning up more calories than I consume.
I was just reading something the other day that it was talking about walking not only is phenomenal for you, but when you are having, let's say you're having a bad day, and you're just not right, just walking is actually very good to give you time to think, to reflect, and to, make sense of whatever those emotions are. Yeah. So everything that you're doing is like essentially all encompassing of the green area, the health area, the safety area, rethinking the road structures to be more accommodating for the economic development. So, this is all these multiple facets of that must have taken a lot of thought process behind that. That's very impressive.
Yeah, there's a lot of different alleyways that you can run down with this, right? And it's like I could justify getting on my bike from a dozen different angles, and honestly, but usually what gets me on my bike is it's just fun, makes me happy. Bottom line, there's a great quote from Albert Einstein, and the quote, I'm paraphrasing, I think, but it says, "I thought of that while riding my bicycle." That's Albert Einstein.
I have seen pictures of him on his bicycle. He loved bicycles. Was that because he thought for such a simple invention, it brought so much joy? Obviously the guy was a very complex, thinker.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that he probably appreciated the simplicity of the design and the efficiency with which the vehicle could accomplish so many things.
That makes a lot of sense. That's pretty well said. So to jump over here now, you authored 2 books, Coast to Coast on a Tandem and Bicycling Historic Route 66. Let's talk about Coast to Coast on a Tandem first.
Okay, Coast to Coast on a Tandem was our first book, and we did the ride in 2014.
Okay.
We went from Bellingham, Washington, all the way to Bar Harbor, Maine. We were on the road for 72 days, and we traveled 4,300 miles, approximately. We did that in June, started June 1st, and we got done mid-August, I think, is when we got done on that trip. And then we wrote the book in 2017.
What possibly came up there and said, let's do this? I got an idea. Hey, Tracy, get the bike. We're going on a trip across the country.
Yes.
So we'd actually been riding a tandem bicycle since probably 1995. We bought our first tandem. So our oldest daughter was getting a little bit big for the bike trailer. We had a second child, either already or on the way. Yep. And so we were logistically trying to figure out how we were all going to go biking together. And the best solution for us, which we'd learned from some folks who went before us, was to get a tandem bicycle, put a special set of pedals on the back so that Melissa, our 5-year-old, probably, something like that, could ride on the back of the tandem with me. And then Tracy could pull our youngest daughter, our newest arrival, Alex, in the trailer behind her. So it was really, we always say we got our first tandem to make our family stronger. And what happened, though, is that somewhere along the line, Tracy said, hey, I'm thinking I'd like to do the Door County Century, the 100-miler up in Door County. And she goes, but I'm not sure I want to try it on my single bike. Could we do it on the tandem? And I'd done a couple of centuries, and I'm like, yeah, we could do it on the tandem. This was an old Trek T100. I mean, it was new to us, but it's not really a road touring bike. I mean, it was okay for that. But we started training on the bike together. And what we discovered was we really liked being on the bike. And it was a lot like ballroom dancing for us. And then as the kids were getting older and kind of tearing our lives apart, that reason that you get together in the first place is completely gone because you need to take care of the kids. So date night for us became going out on the tandem. And when Grandma and Grandpa would take the kids, we'd start doing overnights. And, by the time, though, that we got up to doing 3-week-long trips, our kids were, out of high school at that point. We're like, dang, if we would string together a bunch of 3-week trips, we might actually be able to ride across the country. And by that time, we'd gotten ourselves a really nice road touring Santana tandem and had checked out the gear and kind of had things down. So that was sort of the evolution. So it didn't happen overnight. I mean, we do know people that have gone out and gotten pretty drunk and decided they're going to bike across the country. And we've met them on the road and they're in a lot of hurt, but they do it. It works for them. But in our case, it was just sort of an evolution of our professional and just our personalities, right? We could get out and try something and push our limits. So that's what got us on the bike and just even trying to bike across the country.
There's a really good takeaway from there. Trying new things and challenging yourselves. I think that's a very inspirational thing about adventure that you guys had that would. So I'm sorry, back up real quick here. Before I go any further, how old were you guys when you did that, if you don't mind me asking?
We were 52 when we did our first trip.
Okay, that's another thing there. That's another thing there. A lot of people, when you hit a certain age, you think, okay, this is out. I can't do that anymore. This is out. I can't do that anymore. This is out. I can't do that anymore. Yeah. But you guys, with the love of cycling that you had, that you shared together, the bond, the family bond, including your daughters.
Yeah.
You guys, you two set out on this historic trek. I'd say historic because you guys wrote a book about it. I mean, that's amazing. So what were some of the biggest challenges of doing that? I mean, I'm sure there had to be a lot of planning into that.
There was, but obviously you can't plan every day. You're going 72 days and things change. You might have a bad headwind. You might have rain. You might, whatever.
Be sick.
So you can't plan out every single night where you're going to be and where you're going to stay. The first challenge for me on the trip was the Cascade Mountains. I had never really been up in the mountains on the West Coast. And I was nervous about, first of all, being on the mountains. We decided to leave June 1st because we had to wait until the mountain pass was open. And when we got up there, there was still a couple feet, 2-3 feet of snow, not on the road anymore, but off to the side of the road. And then the second day out, I actually got the flu. So we climbed 6.5 hours with me not eating or drinking anything. And Peter kept saying, do you want to stop? Do you want to go back? I'm like, no, let's just keep going. So that was like the hardest part for me, was the beginning of the trip and experiencing the mountains, and then experiencing them not feeling so good. So.
Yeah, we always kind of joke that Tracy's the real athlete in the family. And I watched that and I didn't even think that was possible. So what I've discovered over the years is when we're on the tandem and doing something really hard, usually when I ask her if she's okay, she's fine. I'm the one that's hurting.
Were you just hoping that okay, we could stop?
We could stop.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, I was willing to keep going, but I'm worried about you. So
Yeah, I mean, I literally I don't even ask anymore. I mean, we have to coordinate our effort on the tandem. If we're gonna suddenly stop both pedaling going uphill, it's good to know we're gonna do that. But
yeah, I mean, doing something like that, that's certainly gotta work up an appetite. You got to get really hungry out there on the road. So when I get hungry, I like to get a number 8 from Jersey Mike's. It's delicious.
Subway sandwiches are my go-to. It's how I got through my law enforcement career, because Subway was open in the middle of the night in Jersey Mike's, and calories are a huge deal on the trip. I mean, we estimated that I'm probably burning 5,000 to 7,000 calories a day.
Wow.
So, when we started out, I think I was 163 pounds, which is about marathon weight for me if I'm training for a run. And at one point, halfway across the country, I looked at the scale and it was 158. And it was like, oh man, I need some more calories. So not quite knowing better at that point, I started eating those little packs of chocolate covered donuts that you could get at the gas station. I love those things, and they do have calories, but apparently there's no micronutrients in there. And in retrospect, what we found was that we had a much more difficult time on that trip than we did on subsequent trips, because we just didn't have our nutrition dialed in to the level of exertion we were experiencing. I mean, we darn near got divorced in New York, and we were just literally exhausted and beat down. And I was, kind of trying to solve problems unilaterally like an ex-cop, and Tracy just needed a hug. And we eventually worked that out and got our nutrition dialed in, which made our, next 2 trips, the Mississippi River and Route 66, much easier and much more enjoyable. Frankly, not that the first one wasn't, but we realized we didn't need to be in quite that much pain.
Well, it sounds like you guys found the secret to happy marriages, or at least you have the formula for marriage counseling. Get on a tandem bike and go across country. We'll see how you do. If you don't kill each other, you'll be much better for it when you get back.
Exactly.
Everybody's happy. So tell me more about Route 66.
Okay, so Route 66 was actually our 3rd trip. So in 2015, we did the Mississippi River. We started in Green Bay, of course, had to go to the northern boundary of the United States. So touched International Falls, and then went all the way down to New Orleans. So that was a 30-some day, and I think went like 3,000 miles. And then in 2016, that's when we did Route 66. Again, started in Green Bay, biked down to Chicago, and then went all the way to Santa Monica, California. And that was our second book, was based on our trip, Route 66.
Now, both adventures, and actually there was 3, you said, right?
Yeah.
It was but 2 books were authored. I mean, do you being a former police officer, I mean, were you, carrying? I mean, there has to be a fear of, especially when you get into a major metropolitan area, of the unknown. Tell me about that.
So we get asked that question all the time. People want to know about, the scary situations, people, lurking around. And this sounds crazy, but we've got 60, 80, 100,000 miles of biking under our belts. Literally not one time have we ever felt like somebody was intentionally targeting us. Now, sometimes motorists aren't paying attention. Logging trucks on 2-lane mountain roads can be pretty sketchy sometimes. But in terms of the interpersonal stuff, no. Now, having said that, we don't make a real good target. Crime tends to be, people picking on people that they know and understand, right? It's not going someplace where you don't feel comfortable and then doing something nefarious. And when you look at, a middle-aged couple on a tandem bicycle, honestly, they don't know if we're homeless or, well-heeled. And even if we are, rich, where the heck are they keeping the money, and what do I steal from these people? I mean, we literally have 55 pounds of gear on the bike, and we are almost always hot and sweaty. This is not somebody that you're targeting. But beyond that, though, I also am trained as a police officer. I spent a lot of time, working with people in, sometimes intense and sketchy situations. I've got a black belt in karate. I'm also a pressure point control tactics instructor, and I wrestled in high school. So, I can handle myself pretty darn well, but I am now, 62 years old. And when I was a cop, we always used to say, if somebody really wants to get you, they can. What you're really planning for is the people that don't have a better plan than you do, right? So, we're certainly, we pay attention, to our surroundings all the time. And Tracy and I have a code word. And if I use that code word, what I'm saying to her is, I need you, if you can, to go for help. I'm going to do whatever I need to do to take care of the situation. And I have never once even considered using that code word, but we do have a plan, and plans are how you do difficult things.
So pedaling and dangerous.
Yeah.
Instead of armed and dangerous.
Yeah.
Okay. So how would I say this? Going back to that. So your gear, what do you keep readily available and accessible? And what are you packing? You got about 50 pounds of gear, you said. So that's going to be a saddle in the front, saddle in the back, and in the mid?
We have 2 panniers or bags on the front of the bike, and then we have 2 bigger bags on the back of the bike. We do carry all of our camping gear because we do camp. We have the tent that's kind of right behind the back seat, and then we have our sleeping bags and cooking gear. We usually carry at least 2 more meals type things, and they're usually like a backpacker type thing meal. And we have, 2 sets of clothing for biking, and I think 2 extra sets of regular clothing that we carry. And that's about it. And it's really amazing how little you need. We have our homes and we have all the stuff that we have at home. And with 50 pounds of gear, we have everything that we need on the bike. And we typically don't, and we have a bunch of repair kits, and we carry extra tires and inner tubes, obviously. But we have everything we need on that bike to be able to get across the country.
Yeah, I was just going to ask. There's got to be room for maintenance gear.
Yes.
So you said you camped, but where did you stay along the way? I mean, hotels and such. And
we do on our first trip. So the coast to coast, we did a lot more camping than we did on Route 66 because we were in more of an isolated area on coast to coast up, in Montana. There's no people, let alone any hotels or even there's an organization called Warm Showers, and it's an online community for cross-country or long-distance cyclists. And people open their homes to you as you're coming through their community. And in turn, we open our home when people are coming through Green Bay. In fact, we're hosting a gentleman tomorrow night that's coming through and staying with us through Warm Showers. But we did a lot more camping on our first route because there just wasn't anywhere, no warm shower stays, and there were very few hotels and motels. So it's just kind of a mix of where we stay depending on what part of the country or where we are and what's available to us.
Wow. Okay. So has there ever been an instance where you couldn't find one, but you couldn't find a hotel, but you also couldn't find anywhere to tent, to pop?
So here's my running joke about that. The difference between being a bicycle tourist and being homeless can be a very, very thin margin. But we have literally not gotten stuck. I mean, we've stayed in hotels where we literally considered setting the tent up on the bed because the hotel was so disgusting. We've been in hotels where we literally wouldn't open up the door because I am sure they were trafficking drugs out of that place. Yep. We've stayed in campgrounds with no showers and no water. That's sketchy. So, you know, and the warm showers thing is always super fun because, you know, these are like-minded people. All they want to do is hear our stories and help us along our way. But there are also times, you know, if you're tired and burned out, man, the last thing you want to do is sing for your supper. So, you know, we pick and choose based on what's available and also on how we're feeling. And sometimes the fact that I am not willing to go to bed without a shower, I have to suspend that if there is no shower, and then I enjoy the next night twice as much.
So when you are having to pitch a tent, you know, like for instance, you mentioned Montana. There's not a lot of people around, but there certainly are animals.
Yeah.
Any concerns there? Any run-ins?
No, it was funny that first night that we were on our own, when we went through the Cascade Mountains, Peter's mom and her partner Rod came with us with an RV. So as we got, you know, into Indy, Idaho.
For the record, it wasn't by choice. Mom just invited herself along for the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, she thought it'd be great to come along, which was nice to have them. But we camped in one of the federal campgrounds in Idaho up in the mountains, and there were bear. And I have never been again in an area where there were bear. And I was like, and Peter's packaging up like our food and, you know, my toiletries and stuff. And I'm like, well, what are you doing? And he's like, well, I'm going to put this in a bag and we're going to tie it in a tree over there. And I'm like, well, why are you going to do that? And he goes, well, would you like the bear over there or would you like the bear over here? And I'm like, oh yeah, put it over there. So yeah, we did have a few incidents with wildlife, but nothing extreme, you know, just.
So one of the funny incidents with wildlife. So we were in Montana, and there are prairie dogs everywhere. Which, you know, I mean, if you're not used to being around prairie dogs, they're kind of cool and they're popping up in their holes and whistling. But I looked over one time. We're going 30 miles an hour on the tandem, and there's a prairie dog keeping pace with me. And I'm like, no way. So I actually Googled it, looked it up. Apparently, the top speed of a prairie dog is 35 miles per hour.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's bizarre. I didn't even know there were prairie dogs in Montana. I always think of like, you know, southern states like, well, Oklahoma is, I guess, considered a southern state. But yeah, I usually think of down, you know, in that region towards Texas. That's pretty cool. So no issues with, say, skunks coming across your tent?
No, I mean, when we got down south, I mean, you had to watch out on the shoulder of the road that you didn't inadvertently run over a dead armadillo, which is something we don't worry about here in Wisconsin. We've seen dead alligators along the road, but no, I mean, you know, it's a highway corridor. You know, the animals by and large have figured out to stay away from it. So,
saw a dead moose too. That was huge animal. We were like, holy cow, what is that? It's a moose.
So what is the most dangerous section of highway that you guys have traversed?
We both know what that is. So in 2019, we were going to pick up, we've ridden, I don't know what, 25, 30 states or something. Yeah. So we had a 7,000 mile trip planned to pick up the rest of them. And we were starting in Bellingham, Washington. And the first part of the route was to go south along the Sierra and Cascade mountain range. And in order to go through California, north to south, you really have two options. One is the Pacific Coast Highway, which we'd ridden before, or you have to take what we've termed Bloody Highway 89, which is a 2-lane mountain road with predominantly logging trucks going along the Sierra and Cascade mountain range. And it literally was the gnarliest piece of road I've ever ridden, because it's 2 lanes with, you know, mountain on one side, narrow lanes with mountain on one side and, you know, 30, 40, whatever foot drop off on the other. And you've got all these logging trucks that they're just trying to beat feet and get their load, you know, to and from the logging site as quickly as they can. And they're used to using the whole road. and had a couple of situations where the logging truck was passing a standard car or motor vehicle in the oncoming lane that I'm in, and there is just literally nowhere to go. And the one time it got super close, I was about to put us in the ditch because it was better than taking on the truck head on. And just at that time, there was one of those mountain motor vehicle pullout areas, and I managed to get to it before the truck got to us. It doesn't happen a lot. We used to say in law enforcement, it's 99% boredom interspersed with 1% terror. And, the bicycle touring, can be the same way. By and large, we spend all day not seeing a car and just, looking at whatever. And then, there are times where if you're going to go across the country, you're going to have to use some marginal facilities.
So what is the contingency plan if something were to take place? I mean, if you were to get hit,
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, you're kind of flying without a net, right? Because we have a cell phone, with us, and we're in bright clothing, so hopefully somebody would see us. But car versus bicycle crashes are bad, right? They don't work, and your odds, even in a car crash, the odds of you finding your cell phone to call for help, that thing is somewhere under the back seat, right? Well, for us, it's probably, we're not going to be able to find it. So you do pretty much everything to stay out of those situations that you can. The contingency is, though, and the advantage we have is being a team as opposed to solo riders. Hopefully one of us is in good enough shape to be able to help the other.
Understood. So when you guys are making your trek and you're planning that out, are there check-in points with your, somebody back home to let them know, hey, we're going to ride in through this section. We're going to give you a call by this, let you know we're okay. And then by, 3 hours from now, we'll do another check-in.
She told me to go, and then she went.
I said I will do it.
Oh.
He's not paying attention. No.
And that's how it goes on the tandem.
Yes. On our first trip, and I think the second trip, we carried a tracker with us. So anyone could go out to the website GPS tracker, and they could see exactly where we were, zoom in, see exactly where we were. So that we had people checking on us that way. Our friends and family could check in on us. We also had, a cell phone, and we were blogging. So people could know, and every night we would stop, whether, at the hotel or camping, and then we would write about our day. So everyone could, and then we put it up so people could see what had happened that day and knew that we were okay and where we were. So those are kind of some safety things that we had that people could keep track of us a little bit. One of the things we did early on, though, we were in the Cascades, not thinking that we would have no connectivity at all there. So we went in, couldn't post for like 4 or 5 days, and people thought something terrible had happened to us. We finally came out, and everybody's like, what the heck? Where you guys been? We were worried about you.
Then we almost turned around and did the same thing in the Appalachian Mountains.
Adirondacks.
Oh, the Adirondacks, yeah. My bad. And one of those mountain ranges, they all look alike.
Yeah.
And I was noticing that the bars on my phone were getting fewer and fewer. And then it was like, oh, dang, we need to let people know. I had one bar left, and I sent out a text to our daughter because I figured the text had a better chance of getting out, and told her, hey, tell everybody that we're going dark for 3-4 days. And we had no idea for 3 or 4 days if we just did the same thing. We got out, and everybody's like, oh, so glad to hear from you. Melissa told us you were okay. I'm like, there you go.
So you mentioned that you blog about the day, right? That's actually a very therapeutic. Is that one of the reasons behind that? Because I can imagine the difficulties and the challenges the day to day on doing those treks together.
I wouldn't actually say for me that it's therapeutic, because we're usually so road weary by the end of the day. I'd be okay with not taking the time, but we have the ability to not only do the trip, but also to share it in real time with people. And so that when we first started out, again, it was just to let friends and family know that we were okay. But halfway through that first trip, I checked the analytics on our Facebook, and we had 6,000 people following our trip. And we just went, what? And that's when we sort of started thinking about, the trips while they were fun and, kind of exploratory for us, they were also a means to an end, right? We had 25 years of bicycle and pedestrian safety under our belts, and, you need to get people's attention. So having that as a way to get our message out became really important to us. So, you always varnish things on social media. I mean, the days were often much tougher than we made them out to be. But then we were able to go back later and use those blogs and those Facebook posts to write our book. At which point our publisher said, "Man, this sounds like sunshine and roses, was it?" And we went, "God, no, it was horrible some days." And he goes, "You need to write about that stuff because you wouldn't really be doing justice to the experience." And that's some of the comments that we get on the book most often, is that just how honest and raw we were about that. We actually darn near got a divorce in New York. And that's the one section of the book where I wrote my section. We tend to write it. We write in both of our voices. We alternate because you don't get the full experience if it's just me talking or just Tracy talking. And so we each wrote our section, handed it to the publisher, and said, "This is too painful, man. You need to just referee this and put it in the book." Thankfully, we've never had to do that again.
Well, the fact that you guys did that, I certainly was awestruck by that. It's an attention getter right there. So when you think about getting your message out, that certainly does grab everybody's attention. Well, they did what?
Yeah.
Together on a tandem bike?
Yeah.
And they're still married?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're still married?
Yeah.
She's alive? Okay. He's alive?
Did they kill him? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm more likely one to have an early demise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm behind him. I could get at him easier.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that certainly does make a lot of sense. And I like the fact that, you shared that you guys co-authored it. It's in your voice and her voice. So, where can people get those? If our audience would like to order your books, where can they go for that?
We do have them on our website, www.webike.org. They can order them there. Amazon also carries our book. We also have it in several local bookshops. The Lion's Mouth in Green Bay, Bosses carries it. Badger State Brewery carries them for us. Saranac Glove.
Neville Public Museum.
And then out in Bellingham, Washington, the Village Books also carries it out there because that was our start, and they sell a ton of our books out there. So
that's very good. How apropos of that.
Yes.
Now to jump over to something else. So given your extensive experience in both adventure travel and sports, what are the most important values you guys have tried to instill in your children, both on and off the field?
We were just trying not to screw them up, to be perfectly honest with you. It's like somebody asked me if riding a tandem bicycle with your spouse is hard. And I said, "Are you kidding? Compared to raising kids, it's a breeze." And we had good kids. No, I think a lot of it was lead by example. I have a story that I tell about my dad. I was a very active young boy. And my dad used to bet me a nickel that I couldn't do something. And when I wrestled in high school, I was all full of myself, and my dad bet me a nickel that I couldn't do 100 push-ups. I spent the whole season working on doing 100 push-ups, which was clearly beneficial, right, to my wrestling. And then in the end, I cranked him out and got the nickel, and I looked at my dad and I'm like, "Oh man, I just did 100 push-ups and all I got was a nickel." And it was kind of at that point that I started to really understand the lesson that he was teaching me, right? It was about me taking charge of my life, me setting goals, and me being proud of that accomplishment. And if it's a nickel that you need to motivate yourself, great. And I think our daughters were both very strongly motivated. It was funny because we had one who just rages on the inside. Not doing her absolute best is just intolerable to her. The other one wants to frankly just emasculate her competition. And it was super interesting because both approaches got them to a point where they could be very successful. And literally and figuratively, as pole vaulters, they were operating in rarefied air. They were often vaulting 2 feet over their competition. So the drive had to come from somewhere, and they both found ways to get that.
So you gave them this intense competitive spirit. Did you give them a nickel though?
No nickels. No.
No, they're both way smarter than that. And I don't know that we gave it to them. I mean, in my case, my parents didn't drive me one direction or the other. They just gave me the latitude and support to be whoever I wanted to be, and just little nudges maybe to help me be the best at that when I didn't have that background myself. And very true for Tracy as well.
Yeah, the girls, I think we always were active in our lifestyle. So whether we are going out biking together or going out for a hike or going out to a park and running around and playing at a local park, I mean, we always had them moving, and we always were moving. So it was important for us to keep them moving along. So I think we built their love of the outdoors and the challenges of just being able to move your body. And it was easy through our daily life and what we were leading by example. They just kind of took that on and enjoyed that and had those challenges that they wanted to meet as well.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that one of the things when I first started running marathons, my running partner told me one time, he goes, by the time you can run 13 miles, you can probably run 26.2. He said, what we're doing with the rest of this training is teaching your brain not to freak out for the amount of pain you're about to put yourself through. And, in our family, a 20-mile bike ride, holy cow, that's like taking a nap on the couch, right? We're so used to doing that. And I think that being around us and being part of our family, the threshold of pain, the tolerance for work, really got ingrained into the girls. Our youngest was just madder than heck at her soccer coach because he kept making her run up and down hills, and she was all over him and hated the guy. And I said, well, what's his job? And she's like, to coach us. And I'm like, what does that mean? Well, he has to get us in shape too. I said, is that what he's doing? I said, either decide you want to do the workouts and be the best you can be, and you're going to let him help you, or just quit. It's fine. You don't have to run up and down that hill. You need to be running up and down that hill because you want to be the best you can be, and you recognize that he can help you be that. And she shut up and started running hills. And it was a huge turning point for that kid because she can be tough. And she just channeled that to know that tough work was to her benefit.
I'm sure that's a moment that really stuck with her too, that Dad challenged me on this. She had a moment, an epiphany of, okay, I'm going to need to put in the work. So how is that translated into your daughter's professional lives?
It's interesting. I don't worry about my children being victims. They have an amazing amount of self-confidence. They're willing to put in the work, and that's reflected in their personal and professional endeavors as children. Our oldest one, was a 2-time state pole vault champ, a high jumper in college as well. And she runs ultra marathons now, which is nuts because pole vaulting and high jumping are quick twitch, right, endeavors. And she completely reworked who she is to do that. The other one is just Alex is, what is she, 29 years old. And I always laugh that she sort of has the work and personal experience of a 45-year-old because she never shies away from a challenge and gets her butt handed to her all the time. But it's that willingness to take risk. It's that willingness to make mistakes. There's that thing about we learn more from our mistakes than we do from our successes.
You nailed on something right there, big time. Risk. Young people being risk adverse, right? Yes. That is a problem, and it's a hindrance. They're afraid to take on the challenges. I've mentioned this many times on this podcast. They become too afraid to, oh, that looks too hard. I don't want to try it because I don't want to fail, and then I'll be embarrassed. But we learn, like you said, we learn so much from our failures. Other than, by being complacent, or not complacent, sedentary, not even trying. That is the real failure right there. You're failing yourself because you didn't take that risk to better yourself and learn from that.
Well, I think we all expect that success is going to come magically too. And one of my trainers explained to me one time, you're watching a surfer surf a 50-foot wave, right? Which should literally be impossible. And I said, how does he do that? He said 5%. And I'm like, what do you mean 5%? And he goes, this guy didn't wake up one day, not a surfer, and go surf a 50-foot wave. He's been working on his craft and his skill for 10, 15, 20 years. He is probably surfing 5% beyond what he's surfed in the past. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's you work on it, and then you just continue to challenge yourself at an acceptable level of risk and, skill advancement. The girls didn't start pole vaulting 12 feet, right? They started by running around with a pole and jumping into a pit with no bar, right? And they fail. We always said with pole vaulting, every attempt or every meet ends on a failure, because you never complete a height and then don't go try the next height. So it's a very interesting paradox, right? You can win the meet, but you're going to fail in the end.
So what was it about pole vaulting that drew them to that event?
Melissa, our oldest, was approached by the coach and saying, hey, you look like you'd be a good pole vaulter, because she was tall and lanky.
Okay.
And she was, had good body control. And he had approached her and said, hey, why don't you try this? And she's like, I don't know if I want to do that. So then the season starts, and like 2 or 3 other of her friends are vaulting or on the team. And she's like, well, wait a minute, why can't I do it? And I said, well, you told him you weren't interested. So then I said, well, you could reach out to him and say, maybe he'll take you yet and see if you could do it. So she reached back out to the coach, and him being very wise by recruiting her friends, said, yeah, I guess you could try it too, So then she started vaulting. And then, of course, our youngest one, seeing that, she started vaulting at a much younger age too, and got into it and, did vault earlier in life. So I don't know, why.
It was it was an opportunity.
Yeah.
They liked the challenge. We had a history of state champions and a program. So if they'd been at a school where nobody pole vaulted, they would not have been pole vaulters. It just was right place at the right time with the right attitude and, the athletic ability. And then you just develop it from there.
So having 2 daughters that were both in the same sport, was there, a little friction there between the two?
No, there really wasn't. The good thing is they're 4 years apart.
Okay.
So by the time Melissa was a senior, Alex was still in 8th grade and wasn't going to be in 9th grade until Melissa was gone. So they never really competed against each other in high school. Melissa was one of Alex's biggest supporters. When Alex was vaulting higher than Melissa, no one could have been happier for her than her older sister. So they drove each other and they supported each other, but there was never that intense competition like, I don't want you to be better than me, or none of that was involved. They both were just very much supportive of each other and happy that they were doing so well.
I think it was the 4 years being apart, but also, like I described before, they are very, very different athletes in terms of their approach. So there was never a competition. They weren't similar. So Melissa needed support in a different way than Alex did. And so it was very easy for them to provide that. Yeah. But it's a very difficult sport. And it's also very hard to be on the top rung all the time. And so there were definitely times when one of the girls would be struggling and the other 3 of us would sit down and pick and choose who was most likely to be able to get through to her. It sort of takes a village.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. I have a brother 2 years younger than me, and he and I are hyper competitive individuals. And so there used to be a lot of sibling rivalry, growing up. He used to hang out with me and my friends, and it was a whole deal. So, that's why I asked. I was curious if that happened there. So, but to, move on from that, back to the biking, how has the landscape of biking and community health changed since you guys started We Bike? And what future developments do do you hope to see or contribute in this field?
That,
Go ahead.
that's a great question. So when we moved to northeastern Wisconsin in 1993, there wasn't a single mile of recreational trail or bike lane. So, and having come from Minneapolis, St. Paul, where I was a park ranger with a huge biking community and trail system, and basically we thought we died and gone to hell. It was terrible. The Fox River Trail wasn't here. I mean, it was tough. Now, the good news was, the bad news was there wasn't any infrastructure. The good news was we didn't have a lot of traffic either. So if you had traffic skills as a bicyclist, you could pretty much do whatever you want. But our traffic is increasing now, but so has our infrastructure. When Tracy left her job in Alloway, she used to commute the 6 miles, about 6 miles, Trey?
Yeah.
Back and forth to work. And at that time, she could do 3/4 of that commute on a bike lane or bike trail if she wanted to. So we're starting to now, people at first, when we were first here, people were complaining, oh my gosh, we don't want to build a trail here. And now people are complaining that the East River Trail and the Fox River Trail don't connect, or that they're not paved all the way. So we have come a long, long way in terms of the infrastructure. We've come a long way in attitude too, because it was pretty common for us to get yelled at by motorists. What are you doing on the road? Get over on the sidewalk where you belong. But it's been interesting because the last 2 generations that have started driving, they tend to look at us. They don't know how old we are or whatever, but they look at somebody on a bike and go, cool. Guy's going where he's going and he's on a bike. And we get almost no animosity anymore. The downside, though, is that people are way, way, way more distracted. It's very difficult to find somebody who comes to a complete stop in their car at a stop sign. And a motorist running a stop sign is one of the number one cause of crashes for bicyclists. And it's sketchy. Tracy's been hit by a car, has a little meniscus missing in her knee, had a concussion, the whole 9 yards. And it's like, we need some help out there. Motorists need to understand that bicycles are legal vehicles, that it's a legit form of transportation. That bicyclist is out there, who's out there is probably a motorist, at other times of their day. So, it's always a double-edged sword, right? But we're still comfortable being out there, and will be as long as we can.
So it's a real dichotomy about it. So you've got the positive mindset of people that they've changed their attitude towards bikes, but on the other, you have everybody is far more distracted than they've in the history of the human race, essentially.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we
could almost be measured in nanoseconds.
Absolutely. I mean, we play games. I learned this from a friend of mine. He said people are so bad at running red lights these days that he actually looks down the road and plays a game with himself and tries to guess which car is going to be the last one to go through the intersection, regardless of what color the light is. And we've adopted that. It's interesting too, back to my cop background, when Tracy and I are on the tandem, we have 2 sets of eyes. Tracy can't see 30 degrees straight ahead of us. And it's difficult for me to see back past 180 degrees. So the 2 of us do what I used to do in a squad car, in a police car, when we were going on an emergency call. If I had a partner in the passenger seat, my partner's responsibility was everything from front center all the way around to the right. So red lights and siren, you come up to an intersection, he'd yell, clear right. And I'm checking to the left. That was the quickest and the safest way for us to go through. Tracy and I will do that on the bike now. There are times when I'm distracted by something straight ahead of me, and with the mechanics of the tandem, it's very helpful when Tracy says car right, because I may not have seen that car coming. So there are things that we've modified in our behavior. And also she had some anxiety after her crash, and that helps with that as well.
Oh, yeah, and that's very unfortunate. I'm sorry to hear that, but glad you're doing well, and it hasn't deterred you from getting back on the bike.
Thank you.
So speaking of the bike, what kind of tandem bike is it that you ride?
So we've had 3 tandems, and unbeknownst to us, when you buy a tandem, apparently you never get rid of it. So we still have all 3 of them. We do loan the first tandem out. Violet, our second one that we did all the cross-country trips with, is enshrined in the upside down from hooks in the garage. We now have
It's a Santana.
It's a Santana.
Yeah.
We now have a CoMotion Speedster, and that is a really interesting bike. It has no chains. It is belt driven front and rear. So the pedals that the belt connects Tracy and my pedaling stroke, but then it also goes back to the drivetrain. And the only way you can do that is by having an internal hub or a gearbox. So we have 14 speeds on that bike, and it's all internal. Remember, like the old 3-speed Sturmey Archer bikes, but this one has 14 speeds, and it's great. We don't have to clean the chain. It's quieter. The power transfer is much smoother. The really funny thing, though, is I have to change the oil on the gearbox every 3,000 miles on my bicycle.
Sounds like driving a car.
Oh, it's hilarious. There's a lot of really neat things to it. It maybe the shifting might be a little bit slower, but we're not super. I mean, we're still really fast, but we're not racing that thing. So, on a cross country trip, the advantages far outweigh the disadvantages.
So I'm actually a mountain biker myself. I'm actually a runner myself too. I meant to mention that earlier. So I'm actually running 2 full marathons this year.
Nice.
Really excited. It's my first full. I've done 4 halves. Loved it. And maybe your daughter can be my coach. If she's running ultras.
I'm sure you know this, but the world gets different at mile 20 and mile 22.
That's what they keep telling me. That's what I keep reading. I'm looking forward to that challenge. I'm also a mountain biker, so I have a hardtail and a full suspension.
Nice.
I got a Raleigh and a Norco. The Norco is the full suspension with the dropper post.
Yep.
I'm not sure. Okay, so you are familiar with that.
Oh yeah, I'm a bike guy.
Okay, yeah, they're the right guy to talk to. So yeah, I did a lot of trail riding, and the more aggressive stuff. Whatever got that adrenaline rush going. That was me. There's a jump right there that I could hurt myself. Watch this. This is going to be awesome.
So the whole thing about trees don't move, you've got that figured out?
Oh, there's a video on YouTube of me just getting taken out by a tree. I
need that link.
Yeah, I'll have to send you the link after. I actually, what happened was my brother and I, in our, competition that is never ending, we were both going down a trail system where there's a lot of jumps. It's very flowy, fast paced. I was leading, he was behind. So he had his GoPro that was watching me. I hit the jump. I landed wrong. It threw me off into the forest. Thank goodness I had my helmet on, because it was we had the pucker factor going on there. And if I hadn't had my helmet on, that tree would have sure done some serious damage. I don't even think I'd be able to hold a complete sentence with you guys. So when I got up, I looked at that tree and I saw the footage. I'm like, wow. Told my brother, I'm like, good thing I had my helmet on, man. You would be down a brother today, probably.
It's interesting, and you know this, Ryan, but people that aren't bicyclists figure that if you crash, you're just dead, right? And by and large, most of us get up and walk away from the crashes. I mean, or you might break an arm and you can live to fight another day, right? I mean, it's even doing sketchy stuff is pretty forgiving. If you haven't read it yet, there's a good story in our Coast to Coast book about us going downhill on the backside of the Cascade Mountains. I have to hold that tandem back at about 45 miles per hour because it'll just fly. But we had a 30-mile-an-hour hairpin turn, or a 15-mile-an-hour hairpin turn. And I'm like, no problem. I got the whole road. I can lean the bike. I can cut it. Boom, right through the first one at 30 miles per hour. No problem. Didn't quite set the second one upright, and darn near took us out on an RV coming up the hill. And when Tracy gets nervous on the tandem, she tends to stiffen up. And she tends to stand up or sit up so she can air brake. And the one thing I needed her to do was to lean to the right hard. And she'd never done it for me before. And I yelled, lean, lean, lean. She just threw her weight to the side. We went around the corner and then kind of commanded me to stop so she could chew me out royally. I don't do that anymore.
That's good.
So what other safety tips that come from your personal experiences or close calls that you'd offer up to our viewers and listeners?
We always tell people to wear bright clothing when they're riding, wear a helmet, like you said, lights on their bike, lights to the front, lights to the back, so that you're more visible on the road.
Day and night.
Day and night.
There's no downside. They don't weigh that much.
Yeah, we have them on day and night. Position yourself on the road so that motor vehicle drivers can see you. Don't go really tight against the curb because you're trying to hide from the traffic. Stay out a little bit so that you're in their sight line and that they can see you. Signal when you're turning left, signal your left turn, signal your right turn. If you're stopping, put your arm down that you're stopping. So the more communication you can have with the motorist, the better. If you're entering an intersection, and catch the eye of the other person entering, make sure that they see you and that you're seeing them. And so be as visible out there and take responsibility for yourself by being as visible as you can be is one of the things that we tell people. The other thing is make sure your bike is in good shape before you go out. We do what we call the ABC quick check. So every time before you get on the bike, you check the air in the tires, check your brakes, make sure they're working properly, check your chains, check your crank arms for your pedals, and then do a quick check. Take a quick ride on it, make sure everything feels good and that the bike is in good working condition, and then take off on your ride. And the worst thing you want to do is go down the block or go down a hill and your brakes aren't working. And all of a sudden you have an incident and you crash into a tree, which can happen. I understand. So that's kind of some of the tips we give bicyclists to make sure they're safe out there and that they're part of the environment and they can be seen. And
just a real simple thing for people to think about, for people that drive a car. If you don't do it in your car, you probably shouldn't be doing it on your bike. It's that simple. You would not drive your car facing traffic. Don't ride your bike that way. You don't drive your car on the sidewalk. Don't ride your bike over there either, because you're less visible and you're going to get picked off coming off that sidewalk through the cross street. So, you enter the intersection based on where the arrows are, and you follow the rules of the road. Part of the problem that we have is that we have motorists acting very strangely towards us. Like we'll be going straight through, we'll be making a left turn at an intersection, and you'll have an oncoming motorist stop in the middle of the road and be waving us through. Well, first of all, that's not legal. Second of all, I have no idea what it is you're doing or what you're trying to tell me. I am not going to pull in front of you. I understand why they do it. Part of the reason motorists do that is because many bicyclists will shoot that corner. They're not following the rules of the road. They're not doing what they're supposed to. So, there is a shared responsibility. We as bicyclists need to do our part. It's not okay to just expect the motorists to take care of our safety and let us do whatever we do.
Yeah, I mean, it's really something to be said about the amount of passion that you guys have about this, about cycling, trying to get this message out there, and the amount of information that you already possess, and in knowing that so many cyclists out there are not following the rules. I'll admit, guilty as charged. I didn't know some of those things that you already outlined, and I actually feel that much better about having this conversation with you now. That wow, I'm going to take what I've learned from there and do better next time when I get on the bike. Which, speaking of which, I do need to air the tires. So thank you for that reminder.
One of the things I think people forget about is that we follow the rules of the road for our personal safety. But think about it this way. If a motorist were to strike us because they're being inattentive, their life, no matter what happens to us, is never going to be the same. I mean, the woman that hit Tracy is a lot poorer than she used to be. Now, Tracy has injuries that'll be with her for the rest of her life, but that woman did not come out of that situation unscathed. And she also had her 2 children in the car with her. And she's trying to explain to those kids how it was she hit that bicyclist. Her insurance rates are going to be astronomical. And I'm guessing she's driving around with some PTSD, because I am absolutely sure she did not mean to hit Tracy. But we are responsible for the consequences of our actions. And so that's one of the things that we really struggle with when we see people out there driving, with this myopic approach. It's really to their disadvantage. So even if you don't care about my safety, don't mess up your own life by doing something stupid and running somebody over.
Yeah, that's pretty intense right there. Yeah, I honestly didn't even consider that about the driver of the vehicle and how that will impact them mentally for the rest of their life. Especially if the crash was worse than the outcome was.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be
Horrific.
pretty close
Yeah.
to unbearable, I would say.
Yeah.
But also just remember, your odds are very, very good. The benefits far outweigh, the dangers for us. Having said that, Tracy's been hit. If I really wish that woman had not changed Tracy's life and my life as well. But all we can do is have these conversations and try to reach as many people as possible.
Yeah, I'd say, and to look at a silver lining from that crash is, you having that, being part of that statistic allows you to give that firsthand account, that firsthand experience when you guys are, giving, at speaking events about cyclist safety and things of that nature and how to avoid a crash. So, I mean, it only further enhances that message you guys are saying and promotes that, silver lining.
Yeah.
There's an interesting dichotomy with us because I still get to ride around like I'm bulletproof, right? I'm an ex-cop. I know how crashes happen. I can avoid them all. I know that's not true, but based on my experience, it's true, right? But Tracy no longer can have that illusion. So, when we're on the tandem and going through an intersection, and she stops pedaling because there is a car approaching from a cross street at a high rate of speed, we had to figure out how to work that out because I couldn't tell her she was wrong. She isn't wrong. But I did have to tell her that I have less control over the bike and I have less ability to avoid a collision if she doesn't continue to pedal. See the paradox? That's been a really tough one to work through, but we do really, really well. And like I told you, we've modified how we ride. I will let her know that I see that car from the right, and she knows that I'm not going to yell at her if she tells me there's a car from the right, because what we need is good information that keeps us both safe and happy and healthy and mentally strong.
Okay, so then there's a constant flow of communication back and forth between the two of you to maintain a good level of safety.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay, so looking ahead, are there any new projects or adventures that you guys are particularly excited about that you'd like to share with our listeners?
We have another trip planned starting in May. We're planning to bicycle to New York City. So from Green Bay to New York City, probably be gone maybe about a month, and then we'll take the train back, Amtrak back to Milwaukee, and then either have Melissa come pick us up from Milwaukee or we'll bicycle back from Milwaukee back to Green Bay.
Melissa doesn't know about this yet, by the way.
Yeah.
Okay, well, she might know now.
Now she does.
Maybe Aaron will come get us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's Aaron.
maybe I'll tell her about that.
Yeah.
How's the planning coming along with that then?
It's coming all right. Problem I have right now is I'm dealing with a shoulder that's messed up. I tore the labrum in my shoulder. I'm in therapy. I had a cortisone shot, and my therapist is like, Trace, you can do this. And when I bike, it doesn't bother me because I'm in a spot with my shoulder that the pain is not there. So we've been working on it. So I'm hoping that we will be able to go. I mean, right now I would say we're going to go. The thing I'm concerned about is day after day after day after day biking, and if that's going to take its toll on my shoulder. So we're going to probably try it. I mean, we'll adapt. Maybe instead of typically we ride 6 days in a row, and then we'll take 1 day off. So maybe we'll go 3 days and take a day off if my shoulder's bothering me. So we don't have it quite planned yet. My start of this whole thing was we're going to drive down to Chicago with our car and then leave our car at Amtrak station and then bike to New York City. Well, then Peter's like, well, we've already biked to Chicago. Why don't we just leave from Green Bay and bike down to Chicago?
Why waste 3 good days of biking?
Yes. And I'm like, okay. So then we expanded on that end. And then he's like, well, when New York City, we're really close to New Jersey. We're really close to all these other states here. We should just hit them all. And then Washington, D.C. is only like 200 some miles away.
249.
Yeah. We could bike to Washington, D.C. because that'd be cool. So this trip that I planned was like maybe 1,600 miles. Well, now with all the stuff he's added, who knows how many miles we're at. And we got to figure out when we can go and how long. So we're still in the process of finalizing our details with that one.
Tracy asked me at one point, she said, how long are we going to be gone? I said, how long are you going to let me be gone?
So how do you and Tracy stay motivated to maintain an active and healthy lifestyle? And how has that evolved as your daughters grew up and moved on to their own athletic careers?
I've always been active. I was a 3-sport athlete all through high school. I played volleyball, basketball, and track. And I was on the first 9th grade girls basketball team, if that tells you anything. So, Title IX totally got me involved and allowed me to play the sports that I did. So I've always been really active. I've always biked all my life, never to the extreme till I met him. But I've always been really active on that end. So, and when we do our trips, we start training about 6 months before. So we do have a trainer that we work with. We're working with the young man from Bellin Health right now, and he's helping us with our training schedule. And we did that with all 3 trips. We are of the mind that, like Peter said, some people go on these long distance trips and they don't train at all. They just start going and away they go and they do just fine. But we, at our age and stuff, we wanted to make sure that we could do it and that we had that ability to ride the miles that we needed to or climb the mountains that we needed to. So we've always trained before all of our trips and then and done really well because we've been able to, have the stamina to be able to ride the miles that we need to put in.
I'm similar to Tracy, but I'm way more hyperactive than she is. I mean, athletics was the way for me to stay calm enough so that I could study, right? So that I could do what I needed to do. So I was a wrestler in high school, if that won't exhaust you. And that's what kept me, in the zone. And all through my life, it's been the same way. I am always happier during the winter when we are actively training for something. It just puts my mind where my mind likes to be. I have to watch out for overtraining for sure. And that's where I've discovered that working with the trainers is a really good thing. Because when you're doing things, we did a 6-hour training ride a couple of days ago. When you're doing that kind of stuff and you have to figure out how much recovery time you need, how you're going to work in the weightlifting, that when you're going to do, nobody likes doing intervals. They suck, but they also increase your ability to do the things that you need to do. So what I found is I have the ability to do the workouts, to push through them. What I need is somebody to help me phase them and also tell me sometimes that, I'm hearing you say you haven't been feeling good for a few days. Let's shut you down here for a little bit and see if we can bring you back strong before you have to take 2 weeks off.
I can relate to that for sure. So one of my problems is, I may have my training that I have to do, but I will overdo it all too often. I'll overdo it. I'll think I'll need to do harder. I'll need to do, or maybe I'm going to take the next couple of days and recoup, but actually maybe I'm taking not enough time to recoup. I should actually be taking a week to recoup. I use a Garmin. I track all my fitness with that. Yeah, I think it's fantastic. And it certainly helps me with my, looking at the metrics. I'm a data nerd. So I'm constantly looking at that. Okay, I gotta do better on my sleep. I gotta do better on my run. Okay.
Exactly.
Now, which brings me to when it's telling me for the training, time to do tempo runs, doing intervals. Nope. I skip that almost every time. I don't need to increase my anaerobic. I just want the aerobic. So, not doing it. Nope.
Yeah.
So, I completely agree with you there.
early in our training, we were doing a lot of intervals and threshold and that kind of stuff, and they're just painful, but the results we were getting from them were amazing until we started to break down. It's like my brain was like, I know what that workout feels like, and I don't think I can make myself do that. And so I reached out to my trainer, and he goes, "Good news, we're done with that phase, and we're going to start, stretching out your aerobic stuff." And it was like, cool. So it's interesting to work with somebody that knows athletes well enough to know how long he can push them in a certain phase before he needs to move them to something else. I mean, we have 2 hard weeks of training now, and then we get a taper week, and then we're gone. And it's like, dude, I can do anything for 2 weeks. So yeah.
That's very impressive. I mean, to hear you say it with such level of confidence at your, not picking on your age, it's remarkable to have 2 individuals, a husband and wife, that are so enamored with staying active, having that healthy lifestyle, and it really is almost like the concrete for the foundation for your family, because it's such a bond between your daughters and you guys. You're always doing things together like that.
So there's always bad stuff that comes up in life, right? Life is not easy. Nobody promised us it would be. But now, with a lot of the things that we've by choice put ourselves through, something bad will happen, and I'll look at Tracy and I'll say, "Is this bad?" And she'll go, "Nope, this isn't bad." I mean, because it does. It resets your physical sense of pain, but also probably even more so your mental. You've been to places that other people haven't, and they don't look as bad. We were riding our new bike in Kansas and Nebraska 2 years ago. We were going to do a 1,200-mile loop, Kansas, Nebraska, Colorado, and Wyoming also. And when we got there, we were getting 11-degree wind chills, 35-mile-an-hour headwinds, and 50-mile-an-hour crosswinds. And we're like, yeah, let's give it a try. And we were just astounded that we could actually ride in those kinds of conditions. I mean, there were times where we'd go, I don't know, we might die here. So we're going to go 8 miles down the road. There's a gas station. We're going to check it out, see how we feel, and decide if we're going to ride the other 50 miles that day. So there were some really interesting calculations that we were making. We were pulling all of our skill set, but we discovered we could actually ride in that. Sometimes it would make, if the wind was 15 degrees to a headwind as opposed to a cross tailwind, we literally couldn't ride in it. And we had to keep readjusting our schedule so much that after, I think we did 450 miles, and we're hanging out in a hotel, eating pizza and drinking beer, which we'd been doing for 2 days, waiting for the weather to change. And Tracy said, I'm having a lot of fun, but I was really hoping we could ride our bike. So then we decided we were going to bail on that trip. That was a weird thing for us too, because we'd completed 3 cross-country trips, epic once-in-a-lifetime trips in a row. And when we had to bail on our 2019 trip because of Bloody 89 and because of where Tracy was with her anxiety and her knee, we'd never had to quit before. We didn't really know that you ever did have to quit. And we had some really long, interesting conversations. And there wasn't any one thing that said we have to quit, but we had a whole bunch of minimums that were at work. Tracy had some anxiety. Her knee wasn't good. I didn't know how to help her. The bike was a little compromised, and we were about to hit the high desert where people were suggesting maybe you want to carry a cardboard sign that says water in case you run out of water, because the motorists that go by are all carrying 5 extra gallons, and maybe they'll give you some. And any one of those things we probably could have handled, but the one thing you can't do in our line of work is die on a bike trip. So, we're talking about being safe, making good choices, doing difficult things, but not at the expense of your safety or your life. And it was a really, really good lesson for us that we do have the ability to assess and make good choices. And now we're healthier, and our bike's working better, and Tracy's knee's coming along, and we can go out and try neat stuff again.
So the weather, tell me, what was the worst weather that you guys have gone through then?
Okay, so when we did our first trip, we went from the West Coast to East. And Peter's like, we do it this way because the prevailing west winds. I'm like, okay, cool. So northern tier, we did that way. So then when we were doing Route 66, we decided to leave from Green Bay, Chicago, and then be heading westbound out to Santa Monica, California. And I said to him, why are we heading westbound if we have the prevailing west winds? Why are we doing it this way? And he goes, well, traditionally, that's what we do. Or that's how this route is done.
It's the go west, young man.
Yes,
kind
go
of
west.
thing,
Yeah.
right?
So we dealt with extreme headwinds, extreme heat. Once we got to like Arizona, New Mexico, and was less than California, it was just we'd have to be up as soon as the sky was pink. We were on the bike and on the road because we wanted to be done by noon because the winds would get so much harder, the temperature would go up, and we just literally couldn't ride in it, or we'd be going so much slower that it would take us that much longer to get to our destination.
Yeah,
so,
you're overheating and using twice as much water as you would be early in the day, and the distances we had to travel were too far. So yeah, that was literally my worst navigational error ever. I was going to say the one that I picked though is when we were up in the Adirondacks. We biked for 2 straight weeks, literally rain all day every day for 2 straight weeks, and it was 52 degrees. So we were just soaked from the time we got up in the morning till the end of the day. And people ask us, do you use rain gear? And you can't, because you overheat so bad in the rain gear. You just have to get wet. So we'd wear enough clothes that even when they were soaked, we could keep our core temperature up high enough. And then we had warm clothes with us. So if we had a mechanical, we would have enough residual heat that we could set up the tent, climb in it, get warm clothes on. So that was probably, I mean, the 50 mile an hour crosswinds were insane. I could ride in them, but I couldn't take my hands off the handlebars. So typically we stop and take a break every hour, every 45 minutes, but I couldn't drink anything. So we were getting dehydrated. I'm sure it was just blowing the water out of us. So we would have to go for like half an hour, stop, drink along the side of the road, and then try to get back on. It was doable. It was surprising. But now if there's like a 20 mile an hour wind and we have a training ride, it's like, yeah, we're good. Yeah, we don't even care.
Yeah.
So would you say your marriage is so much stronger because of these adventures that you guys go on together?
I would say it is. I mean, it's a challenge. People see us on the tandem and they'll go, oh my gosh, it looks like fun. We would love to do that. And we just look at them and go, well, can you wallpaper together? If you have a wallpaper together, and they look at each other like, no. And we're like, try it. But, they say a tandem or even a double kayak is a divorce vehicle. So it is tough. You have to give each other a break, swallow some stuff at times and just let it go. But I think it probably has made our marriage stronger because we've been through so many things together and so many experiences, and, some of them tough and some of them just really fun that we'll remember, forever. So yeah, it definitely, I think, has strengthened our marriage.
Yeah. I mean, we have this code based on 37 years of experiences that nobody else can understand, right? I mean, you probably noticed we take turns, answering your questions. She knows what I'm going to say. I know what she's going to say. What I'm really listening hard for, though, is the time that she'll come up with something that I haven't heard before. And, that's what makes me love and appreciate her even more. It's those nuances, those new things. I'm pretty big on, I used to be a cop, right? I had to get it right to go home safe and to keep the people around me safe. So I was really used to there being one way, and that was the way I knew how to do it. But what the bike has taught me is that I'm always compromised, but I always have this incredible resource right there with me, literally 6 inches behind me, if I'm smart enough to get off of my high horse and listen to her. So, if I tend to bonk really easily because I'm burning so many calories and I become an idiot. I'm not safe on the bike. I'm not making good choices. And Tracy would say, do you want something to eat? And I'd just bitch at her. And now between the two of us, we figured out that what she'll do is she'll say, do you want something to eat? Do you want something to eat? Do you want something to eat? And finally, I will just put my hand behind me to get her to shut up. And I eat something. And 5 minutes later, I'm coherent and can do my job again, right? Or if she's not navigating well, or if she's cranky about something, I've learned to cue on the fact that she's behaving differently, not on how she's behaving. Because that means something's changed that we need to address to stay safe and happier, honestly.
Mm-hmm. And Tracy, I like that you referenced, well, can you wallpaper together? You know, there's all these other things that, sure, I'm sure one of the first words they use to describe when they see a tandem bike or see you guys, well, that's cute that they're doing that together, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, but how many things can you do with your significant other and you're not ready at each other's throats about it? You know, I'm sure many times where like you loaded the dishwasher wrong, or you did this, you know, like,
Yeah.
you know, like I can't. You need to go. You need to go over here. I'm just gonna let me do this by myself. You know.
Yep. Well, even road tripping by in your car. Think of how many times you and your spouse or your partner have gotten into it when you're trying to get somewhere in your car. Now you add the bike to it. You're out in the elements. You're tired.
You can't see each other.
So it makes it that much more of a challenge. And I'm the navigator. So I have the maps and I'm the one telling Peter where to go. And I'm not, when we first started this, I'm not the best navigator. I can't read a map real well. I'm much better at it now. But so that was a challenge for me and put a lot of pressure on me at times to make sure I got it right. Because if I screwed up, we could go 10 miles out of the way of the wrong direction. And all of a sudden we have 20, another 10 to come back and get where we were. So that puts a little pressure on it too, making sure I get us where we should.
So I'm dying here. One time we ended up on the wrong side of the lake. That was good. Yeah. And the other time we had to make a right-hand turn and we both look at this hill and we're like, oh God. I mean, it was like 200 feet straight up. So we hammer this thing out. We get up to the top. We look over the edge and it's like, oh, that's where we were supposed to turn.
Yeah.
So we're coming up on time here. So we've covered your WeBike endeavor. We've covered your books, your adventures on the tandem bike. Is there anything that we've missed there?
I think the only thing is kind of what does all this mean, right? It's like, why do we do this? And we would not have ridden across the country had I not known two friends that had done it before, and they'd been willing to share their stories. I do a lot of training with police officers and other people, and I tell a lot of stories. My dad was a minister. It just comes naturally to me. But the cool thing about those stories is that if you haven't experienced some of the things that we've been through, we can tell our stories and you may actually be able to benefit from those stories, whether it's, getting out and being active, how you interact with your spouse, how you drive your car, all of what you're afraid of, whether you're, willing to take a risk, whether you're willing to make a mistake. And I think our hope is that maybe our stories will benefit other people's lives in some ways. If they don't, great, I'm fine with that, right? But we have the capacity and the ability to put those things out there, and we feel really good about it. Plus, it's an opportunity for us to relive some of these amazing experiences. You learn. I've got a black belt in karate. They make you teach once you hit the red belt level, and they do that because if you're going to master something, you need to be able to teach it, communicate it, and share it. So that's what we get back from this.
One of the first questions you asked us, Ryan, was how safe we felt out there, and if anyone had ever done anything, kind of mean to us or that we were kind of sketchy about. After we got done with our trip, I said to Peter, this trip restored my faith in humankind. People are genuinely very kind and very nice. And I think in our world right now, you get those really quick shots of negative things all the time. There's not a lot of the good things that go on. And there's a ton of that. And we experienced that on every one of our trips. We met so many kind people. We'd pull into a little town and probably have 3 or 4 people come up to us and talk to us. And what are you doing? And what do you need? And can we help in any way? They just wanted to be a part of the journey and help us be successful. And So it's just doing the trips, and again, relaying our trips to people and letting them know that generally people are very kind and they just want to be part of it and help you and be successful.
And you're absolutely right on that. Because when you think about when humans are in their more basic, that's when they have the more proclivity towards, aggression. But, in this modern society, like you said, restored faith in humanity, people are kinder, gentler, especially when they're more knowledgeable and they all feel safe themselves. So any aspirations to do a trek outside of the U.S.?
People ask us that all the time. So we have like 19 states we have not traveled through yet by bike. And that's my goal, to hit them all. And then look at going over to Europe or across the pond or whatever and do some biking over there. So hopefully we will do that. And we may do it before we get the other 19 states. I'm starting to think, well, I'm getting old. I probably should start doing some of that over the Europe stuff. So
I think I have a slightly different version of that. People ask me if I get bored on the bike. I mean, I've ridden across Montana, right, on the front of a tandem bicycle, and I never get bored because, how the road is built, the undulations of the topography, the weather, it doesn't matter where I am on my bike, and I always get that joy, right? So I'm not going to be that much happier because I'm in Europe. We will very likely be there. The best bicycle museum in the world is in Glasgow, and I'm not going to pass that up, and love to bike Ireland. But the main point is that we're happy, healthy, and on our bike, together. And where we do that is very much secondary.
True.
Okay, so for our viewers and listeners, and they want to find and follow Tracy and Peter, where do they need to go?
So the easiest way, we'll be blogging on our next trip, so they can go to our website, which is www.webike.org, and there are links there to the blog. They can also check us out on Instagram at webike.etc, so WEBIKE.etc, and then probably Peter Flucke on Facebook, and we're always posting kind of day to day on those things. So, and our old trip blogs are up on our website. So those are kind of fun. And there's videos of, bombing down the Cascades at 45 miles an hour with a stream running along next to us. And so, yeah, there's tons of content up there. And yeah, we're not trying to hide. We're trying to sell books.
And when's the next time that you guys are doing any public speaking on bicycle safety or book signing, for that matter?
We are going to be on the WPR.
Yep, on the Larry Mueller show on the 25th from 11 o'clock of April, from 11 o'clock to 11:45.
Okay.
Glad I remembered that.
Yeah. That's good recall, Peter.
Yeah, that's good.
I'm the one doing all the posts.
Yeah. So again, really appreciate you guys taking the time to have a conversation with us. This is the After the Game podcast. It is a part of Team 2. What Team 2 is, that we are a streamlined platform for schools to essentially manage their athletic programs. So when you think of player registrations, you think of fundraising management, you think of digital ticket sales, and that's what our company does. So the podcast is meant to highlight the benefits of athletics and what it can do for people. So you two are exemplary of what it does, and it certainly has transformed you guys into a power couple.
Thank you. I like to think of it as collecting on our investment now. When we started training for this next trip, I was a little nervous because we're 62 now. And our trainer from a couple of our trips looked at me and he kind of chuckled. He goes, at this point, I would say that 60 is the new 30 for you guys. You'll be just fine.
Well, good. That makes me feel better because I just turned 39.
There you go.
I'm always looking at the 80-year-olds in the gym now who can still move, and I'm super excited.
So any other last thoughts or remarks?
No, thanks for having us on the show. It was nice to talk to you and share our stories. We always like to share our stories with people.
Also, just I'm excited about your platform, having raised 2 athletic children. The easier you can make all those aspects for the kids and the parents, the better the performance and the happier people will be. So good luck with everything.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you guys so much. Appreciate you guys being on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.